Thank you.
Nathan Osmond is making a name for himself in the country music world with 4 consecutive #1 singles. He was recently nominated as New Artist of the Year, Male Vocalist of the Year, and Country Breakthrough Artist of the Year by the New Music Awards in Los Angeles. He shared the stage with names like Carrie Underwood, Chris Young, Martina McBride, Lone Star, Alabama, and more. On top of his musical talents, Nathan was selected as one of the top 10 young Americans of 2013 by the United States Junior Chamber, the JCs, for his musical achievements and humanitarian efforts. We are honored to have him here tonight as your entertainment. Please help us welcome to the stage, Nathan Osmond.
Ladies and gentlemen, please come to your feet, Nathan Osmond.
Thank you, brother. Sick of all this madness, every day it's the same old news. It's time for massive action, not mass distractions. It's time we face the truth. Open up your eyes to see what's really going on. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. Let this be our song. Come on, sing it all in. We can't make it till we're all in. It takes everybody, hear the message. Throw your fears away. Come on, Utah. Ooh, tell me, are you all in? Come on, everybody, fall in. One by one, a new tomorrow starts with us today. Woo! Tempers fly and statues fall. There's chaos in the streets. Cities burning, people yearning for peace and unity. Well, there's no room for hatred. Put our differences aside. Hand in hand across the land, let us all unite. Come on, sing it all in. We can't make it till we're all in. It takes everybody, hear the message. Throw your fears away. Who tell me, are you all in? Come on, everybody, fall in. One by one, a new tomorrow starts with us today. Woo! Hey guys, can you give it up for Tina right here? She put this whole thing together. Let's put our hands together. She's all in. Oh yeah! Woo! My question is, are you all in? Come on now, let's bring this song home. The faded future generations counts on what we do. Let's give them a bright tomorrow. It's up to me and you. It's up to me and you, everybody. All in. We can't make it till we're all in. It takes everybody, hear the message. Throw your fears away. Tell me, are you all in? Come on, everybody, fall in. One by one, a new tomorrow starts with us today. Tell me, are you all in? Come on, everybody, all in. It takes everybody, hear the message. Throw your fears away. Tell me, are you all in? Come on, everybody, fall in. One by one, a new tomorrow starts with us today. Oh yeah. Thank you so much. Keep that going. Wasn't Kate Daly amazing? Wasn't that great? I tell you, I loved our bishop. Wasn't that great? Woo! I'm all in. Guys, let me introduce myself. My name is Nathan Osmond. How many of you guys remember my family, the Osmond family? Alan, Wayne, Merrill, Jay, Donnie, Marie, and Jimmy, half the state of Utah. I tell you, the #1 question I'm asked as an Osmond is, who's your daddy? The one on the left, that's Alan right there. He's the oldest of the Osmond brothers. He started Stadium of Fire. We are patriotic in our home. He served in the Army too. I love that. But then my brothers and I got started a little boy band. I used to tour around with those guys like New Kids on the Block, Color Me Bad, Salt and Pepper, Naughty by Nature, Extreme. How many 90s babies do we have out there, huh? Oh, you know who I'm talking about. But then my wife says, you should go country. So here's a little snapshot of what my life looks like right here. We've had 4 consecutive number ones so far. We're so pumped about that. We're going to keep doing it till we get it right. But you know what? I got a great podcast. Any podcasters out there? I hope you guys will all go listen to this. I just interviewed Tina on my show. Great interview. So I hope you guys will go subscribe to this. But I'm also a mortgage man. You guys, I turn people into Utahns all the time. But more importantly, I am a family man. This is my family right here. We're the proud parents of 4 boys. It's the Osmond way. I come from a family of 8 boys. There's 57 grandkids on the Osmond side. Only 17 are girls, and some of them were adopted. We have to literally adopt to get girls in our family. But the reason I show you all this is because this is what's most important to me. That's right. You know, you saw General Flynn yesterday. He brought his son up and his grandson. I love America. I even wrote that song with Senator Orrin Hatch called I Love America. And you know, in our business of the entertainment world, it's kind of strange to see somebody that's willing to get up on a stage like this and talk about what's most important to him. God, family, and country. And I tell you, I'm not ashamed. You know, there's a great book that we read as a family about an ancient American warrior who ripped his coat apart and put it on a flagpole and waved it. And this is what he wrote on his coat. In memory of our God, our religion, and our freedom, and our peace, and our wives, and our children. If we don't have that, what do we have? And it's inconvenient to be here. I get it. None of us want to have to be here doing what it is that we're doing right now because we just wish that we all understood this concept. But apparently we've forgotten. So I want to take us on a little journey right now on history. I'm a history buff. I love history, and I want to take you back in time, guys. I want to share a miracle story that took place. We're here today to celebrate liberty, and I love that. Liberty is not the same as freedom. Freedom is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. But liberty is freedom with responsibility. Understanding that liberty comes from a higher source, our Heavenly Father. I want to take you to the Old South Meeting House. I took this picture. It's one of my favorite places in Boston as you walk that Freedom Trail. And I'm going to tell you a story right now that we're not taught in our history lessons. I'm going to take you back to 1746. This was the time when France was at war with England. Did you know that 25% of England lived here in the colonies at that time? Yeah, 1 in 4 people had a family member living here in the colonies. And France knew that. And they knew that an attack on the colonies was an attack on England, and they were on their way. You see, they had 140 ships. 100 of those ships carried 10,000 troops. The other 40 ships were frigates of war packed with black powder and guns and cannons. And Admiral Duke d'Anville had been given the orders to burn Boston to ashes. And they were on their way. Imagine how our ancestors felt who were here in those colonies. I had ancestors there. And you know what? They had a national day of prayer. And the people of Boston walked to the Old South Meeting House in the sunlight. And they were met there by Reverend Thomas Prince. And Thomas Prince prayed one of the most powerful prayers you've ever heard. I thought it would be good to go ahead and share some of the words that he shared that day. Deliver us from the enemy. Send thy tempest, Lord, upon the waters to the eastward. Raise thy right hand. Scatter the ships of our tormentors and drive them hence. Sink their proud frigates beneath the power of thy winds. And I tell you, as he prayed, listen, that sunny day turned dark, and the winds blew through the streets of Boston. They circled that Old South Meeting House. People said it blew so hard that it sounded like people were banging on the windows. In fact, it blew so hard, it actually rang the bell in the Belfry Arch 2 separate times. And Thomas Prince continued praying, saying, "We hear thy voice, O Lord. We hear it. Thy breath is upon the waters to the eastward, even upon the deep. Thy bell tolls for the death of our enemies. Thine be the glory, Lord. Amen and amen." They sent out an ensign ship to find out where the French were, how close they were getting. And as they turned around, they brought back news that was almost too miraculous to be true. This wind carried out to sea, and it carried with it a pestilence. And this pestilence wiped out the French fleet. Thousands died at sea. Thousands more were so sick they couldn't even stand on their feet. Duke d'Anville sitting here, the admiral, going, "We're being defeated by an invisible enemy." So guess what he did? Like a coward, he ordered poison and he killed himself. And now his vice admiral sitting there, I can't go back to France like this. He drew his sword and he shoved it through his heart. And France returned mission unaccomplished. God protected this country even 30 years before we declared ourselves an independent nation. This is the promised land. And the reason I tell you this story is this. It gets better. Did you know that in that congregation that day, as Thomas Prince prayed, was a 10-year-old boy named John Adams, who said, "It was on that day that I became a patriot." Wow! Did your history teacher ever tell you that story? Come on. We can do better, America. And I want to remind us of what we have. Why America? Guys, that's the room right there. I took that picture and just thought of this American story that we need to share with our kids and our grandkids. It's inconvenient. John Adams even said that. He says, "I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain." Guys, I know we're not happy with what's going on in the world. I'm so excited to see the amount of people that we have here. We're waking up. And just like John Adams, I am so grateful for all that are here today, sacrificing time away from your kids, your family, your work, whatever it was that brought you here, so that our children and their children can study other better things. I love that. Guys, we are the exception. America is the exception. I know people say, "Oh, why do you get off saying that?" I'll tell you where that comes from. Did you know that the average lifespan of a constitution lasts 17 years? That's it. Then they ratify it or they throw it out and start over completely. France has had 15 constitutions. Venezuela, 25. Look at this one right here, guys. Haiti has had 21, and if you live in Poland, you've had 7 constitutions just since the 20th century. And if you live in South Korea, heck, you've had 6 just since World War II. We are the exception. There was a young millennial, his name was Alexis de Tocqueville. You may have read his book. They used to study it. It was called Democracy in America. And he came here and he wrote about his experience in America. You know what he said? He said this. He says, "America is exceptional." This is where we get that term, American exceptionalism, from this book. And this young man, as a millennial, went up to the old John Adams. He says, "Old man Adams, I got a question for you. We appreciate the freedom and the liberty that we have, and we're so grateful for your sacrifices. Who do we owe gratitude for all of the things we take for granted so much every day?" And old man Adams said to him, he says, "You want to know who you owe gratitude for the liberty and all the blessings you receive besides the great Almighty? Right at the top, you got to put Reverend Dr. Samuel Cooper." And you say, "Who? Who? Did you guys study Reverend Samuel Cooper? Yeah, I didn't, not in my classes. What about Reverend Dr. Jonathan Mayhew? He was right at the top with him. Reverend Dr. George Whitefield. You guys heard of these guys? What about this from Reverend Dr. Charles Chauncey? These guys are huge. Whether they're black, whether they're white guys. How about our black founding fathers? You hear about these guys? We treat black history poorly in our country. Reverend Richard Allen, amazing. Absalom Jones, Reverend John Merritt, Reverend Lemuel Haynes. Have you guys heard of him? Guys, this is our history. Here's an eyewitness, John Adams, saying, "These are the guys." How many of you studied preachers in history class? No, but you know what? How many look at the Declaration of Independence as a sermon topic list? But that's exactly what it is. See, a lot of the wording from our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution comes from the pulpits of America 20 plus years before they wrote that document. These were inspired men. Heck, it goes on, guys. Let me show you some more. This gentleman, Wentworth Cheswill. Write these names down. Go Google them. Study these guys. He held office for 49 years. He held 8 different political positions. There was never a time in Massachusetts when blacks couldn't hold office. Did you know that history? That's pretty cool. Look at this. Lemuel Haynes, I love this guy. First black man to ever hold a higher degree in education in America. He was a soldier in the American Revolution. Guys, I tell you, he was a Minuteman with George Washington. Every year on his birthday, George Washington, he held a sermon all about George. Isn't that awesome? Look at these guys. Write these names down. These are powerful people. They're our founding fathers. I love this. History's awesome. Did you know we had a black man right here? Look at this. Crossing the Delaware. Prince Whipple. I stood at his graveside. Go Google that man. I love him. But I tell you, these guys were incredible people. When they wrote that Declaration of Independence, when they gathered together for that first provincial conference, I got to tell you this. The people from Massachusetts didn't know the people from Vermont. The people from Vermont didn't know the people from New York and other places. And look at this, guys. Did you know they had a 2-hour prayer session? Guys that had just met each other, didn't know each other from Adam. All they knew is that we have a cause bigger than us. And they gathered together. They had a 2-hour prayer session. Are you told that in history? Look at this, guys. They studied 4 chapters of the Bible. In fact, one of the chapters that they studied, you should go read it tonight, Psalms 35. Because God showed them in this prayer session, in this Bible study, things they never knew they didn't know. They got the confidence to go out there. In fact, I tell you, it's incredible. Colonel Smith and these guys, he wrote to Abigail talking about this. You know what John Adams says? Abigail, I must beg you. You must read this psalm. Read the 35th Psalm to your friends. Read it to your father. Abigail, we have appointed a continental fast. Look at this. Millions will be upon their knees at once before their Creator, imploring His forgiveness. His smiles on American council in arms. Imagine, Abigail, 3 million Americans all at once praying and fasting. So you see, this is what we had. We don't hear this history. Look at this. This was the first of 15 times that Congress called the people of the United States to prayer. By the time that you get here to 1815, they had over 1,400 issued prayers in America. Guys, we got to remember, where does liberty come from? I tell you, the war in heaven continues here on this earth, and I'm not ashamed to talk about it. He talked about the Colonel Smith taking over that fort, that British fort. That's like talking about a bunch of rednecks taking on the Navy SEALs. We did it. And on top of that, guys, we didn't even have a Navy. I mean, we did. It's right here. It's called the Gunboat Philadelphia. If you want to see this ship, it's like a basic rowboat with 2 cannons in it. But you know what? They took over a 64-gun and a 20-gun British man-of-war with that. Isn't that amazing? That's God in the workings of our country. He says this, Abigail, it appears to me that the eternal Son of God is operating powerfully against the British nation. These guys were not agnostic deists and atheists. I want you to go read this book called The Jefferson Lies. You're going to learn a whole bunch about Jefferson. But look what George Washington said. Right here in 1778, he says, the hand of providence has been so conspicuous in all this that he must be worse than an infidel that lacks faith and more than wicked that has not gratitude enough to acknowledge his obligations, close quote. That's powerful right there. That's George Washington. You know, when I was out there, I did 277 live events in 201 cities just in the year 2019 before COVID shut it all down. I had to go see George. My middle name is George. And I walked down there at Mount Vernon, and I said, I've got to meet George. My middle name's George, and we Georges got to stick together. I said, would you mind taking a picture of me right here? I was the first one down there that day. And the security guard says, I'm going to do one more for you. She unlocked the gates and let me stand in between George and Martha. I cherish this picture. And when she wasn't looking, I touched it. I had to touch history. George and I are tight. Anyways, guys, these are our founding fathers. And what are we told about them? The people that are just coming to this country, they're told false things about these men. They were God-fearing men, and I can prove it. I've seen their histories. I've read their writings. And you know what? You need to go do some more research if you feel otherwise. Because look at this. Did you know that the family Bible was funded by 12 signers of the Declaration of Independence, including John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, Gunning Bedford Jr., John Dickinson, and more. Did you know that? Did you know that the very first Bible, the Bible of the Revolution, there's only about 100 of these left in print. I've held one of them. I've read it. Did you know that it has right here it says this, that the first Bibles were printed by the English in America. Were printed by who? Congress. Why? For a neat addition to be used in our schools. Wait a second, I thought these were agnostic, deists, and atheists. Why are they paying for the printing of the first English copy of the Bible to be used in our schools? You see, the thing is, they never intended it to have separation of church and state, meaning that we throw religion out. You see, they had just come from a land called England, where the Osmonds come from. And there we had kings. And the king, if he was Anglican, you were Anglican, that was you. If he was Catholic, that was you. But guys, we live in a new country. They just said there should be no state-sponsored religion. That's all they meant by that. Guys, we've got to remember where our liberty comes from. We must remember the Almighty. Look, they wrote this. This is in the front of the first English Bible right here in America. A neat edition of the Holy Scriptures for the use of our schools. A congressional endorsement. Remember, America, wake up. Let's take back our liberty. That's why I'm here. I'm excited to share this. I walked over there to Boston area, right over there, the Cambridge. How many guys have ever been to Harvard campus? I want you to, next time you go there, I want you to go to what they used to be called the School of the Prophets. Did you know that? Harvard, the School of the Prophets? And Yale, the School of the Prophets. That's what they called it. And they had a slogan. Did you know this? Look at this. Right here, if you can see it, it says on the very top, I'll circle it, it says Christo et Ecclesiae. You know what that means? Christ and the church. Awesome. Later on, they added that word veritas, which means truth. Because how can you have truth without Christ and the church? Well, over 200 years it lasted until Charles William Eliot became the president of Harvard. He says, yeah, get rid of Christ in the church. Let's just keep truth. And that's where it disappeared. But you can still see this on the gates of Harvard, right there in concrete, guys, Christ in the church. And right to the right-hand side, hidden by a tree, is almost intentional, is this sign. It says, after God had carried us safe to New England, and we had builded our houses, provided necessaries for our livelihood, reared convenient places for God's worship, and settled the civil government, one of the next things we longed for and looked after was to advance learning and perpetuate it to posterity, dreading to leave an illiterate ministry to the churches when our present ministers shall lie in the dust. The first fruits of New England wrote that. Think about that. The whole sole purpose they started this school, and Yale and others, was to help educate and inspire the next generations of ministers. Church, these are the guys, they didn't intend for separation of church and state. We've got to learn the true history of our country. I've had a chance to go all over this country. I got to go in the Pentagon right there. They call that ground zero right there. The Russians call it ground zero. It's actually you know what it is? It's actually a bakery. Isn't that cool? Guys, I've had the chance to stand right there in Worcester, Massachusetts. On this spot is where they read for the first time the Declaration of Independence, Isaiah Thomas. This is so fun to go back. This house, have you guys heard of General Nathaniel Greene? I hope you're writing some of these names down if you don't know who these people are. I was there, his house was closed, but I had to wander the grounds because I had to see where the second in charge of George Washington lived. And I looked over, I swear I thought it was a ghost. There was a person standing inside the home. And I said, well, I'm going to go knock on the door then. Knock, knock, knock. He opened it up. It was the curator. I said, hey, I come from Utah, but I love history. And I love this man. My name's Nathan, too. That's how I get into most places, Nathan or George. But you know what? He let me in, and this man funded the American Revolutionary War right out of his own pocket. Did you know that? He died with almost nothing to his name. He moved down to Savannah, Georgia, and that's where he's laid to rest. I've stood at his graveside. But I just love our country. Can I tell you another history story? Can I do that? I'm going to do it anyways, guys. What's this? Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. I was told this story by my good friend Andy Andrews. He's been on my podcast before. Nobody tells it better than him. But I asked him if I could share this story today here with you guys. Look at this. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. This was a professor of rhetoric. That's right. The only reason he was made colonel is because he's the first guy to show up there in the recruiting office. All right, we got ourselves a colonel. That's how it worked. Then they got some other guys that came in. They put them in positions just under him. But you know what? He wasn't trained. He's from the state of Maine. And he had to serve his country. He went there to serve. And you know what? He was an amazing guy. Colonel in the Union Army, the 20th Maine. Here's a picture of the men of the 20th Maine right here. You're going to get to know these guys in the next few minutes. But they were given a very hard assignment. In fact, they were placed on the very end of this very long line of men up on the top of this little hill. In fact, they call it Little Round Top. They were at the very left end of this line, just outside of this little town called Gettysburg. I love this story. Watch this. On July 2nd, 1863, he was told, Joshua, at all hazards, you do not let these guys come through here, because if they do, they will take the high ground and they will wipe us out at Gettysburg. At all hazards, don't you dare let them through. He says, yes, sir. And they had their orders. Well, watch this, 80,000 men. And then at 2:30 that afternoon, in that hot wool uniform they wore, the South attacked. That's right, they attacked, and they attacked with a vengeance, guys. They had that rebel yell that just turned your blood ran cold when you heard that yell. And they came up from Devil's Den right there in that valley of death. And I tell you, they pushed him back. And they came back up again. They pushed him back. Guys, on the third attack, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain takes one right to the belt buckle. He thought he was a dead man. And they got over that wall they had built, that rock wall about this high, but they were able to get him back. And then the fourth time again, they pushed him back, but this time, they're all out of bullets. They're all out of ammunition. They're all down to 80 men. And I gotta say this. They said, do we sound the retreat? He says, no, sir. His brother came over to him. He says, hey, do we sound the retreat? He says, no. Go tell your brother James, Tom. Go tell him to keep his head down, because with 3 of us here, this could be a bad day for Mama. 3 brothers fought on that hill together. Did you know that story? Watch this. This 12-year-old boy climbs a tree. He can see his vantage point. Says, they're coming back up. They're coming back up. Do we exercise? Do we sound the retreat? Sergeant Tozier came over there. He says, no. He says, fix bayonets. And you can hear that steel on steel. And these men with no bullets say, what do we do? He says, exercise a great right wheel. And they're like, what? He says, the colonel intends to charge. And before they could do anything, he drew his sword and he says, charge! And he and 80 men with no bullets jump over a rock wall and into history. And 80 men with no bullets hold over, guys, watch this, hold over 400 of the South at gunpoint. He takes his sword, he places it on the shoulder of one of their leaders and says, you, my friend, are my prisoner. And I tell you this, we're just not told these stories. In fact, one guy held about 80 guys by a tree by gunpoint, and as Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain walked past him, you know what he said? Hey, sir, I have no bullets. And Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain said, well, don't tell them that. This is awesome, guys. The reason I tell this story is that historians of this country, I mean real smart people, they say that if Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain and the 20th Maine here hadn't jumped over that wall, the South would have taken over and they would have wiped us out at Gettysburg and we would have lost the war, the North. And they said if we had lost the war, our country today would look a whole lot different than it does right now. It'd be more of a patchwork like Europe is. And if we looked more like Europe was, we wouldn't have had the manpower during World War II to fight 2 battles on 2 sides, the Germans and the Japanese. It was because one man made one move on one day that our country looks the way that it does today. God bless Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. and the men of the 20th Maine. I love this story. True story. When I was there last time in Gettysburg, I went up there on the top, a little round top, at 6:30 in the morning before the sun rose, and I knelt on that ground, and I gave thanks to my Father above for those men. So grateful. I come from a family of military guys. My father served in the military. He learned from his father. And you know what? I believe that there are miracles. My grandfather just learned this last year. He was attacked by the Nazis. He was building airports for our allies in England. And if he had not gotten shell shock from the attack of those Nazis and shipped home, he would have been there at D-Day. George Verl Osmond, who I'm named after. I believe that things happen for a reason. I believe that God has exercised his righteous dominion to be able to protect people, because I want to share a letter that came to Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain years later. Remember this letter. It came from a member of the 15th Alabama. Dear sir, this is when he became the governor of Maine. Dear sir, I want to tell you a little passage in the Battle of Little Round Top Gettysburg concerning you and me, which I am now glad of. Twice in that fight, I had your life in my hands. I got a safe place between two rocks and drew bead fair and square on you. You were standing in the open behind the center of your line, full exposed. I know you're ranked by your uniform and actions, and I thought it mighty good thing to put you out of the way. I rested my gun upon the rock and took steady aim. I started to pull the trigger, but some strange notion stopped me. Then I got ashamed of my weakness and went through the same emotions again. I had you practically certain, but that same strange something shut right down on me. I couldn't pull the trigger and gave it up. That is your life. I am glad of it now and hope you are. Yours truly, a member of the 15th Alabama. I tell you this. Your life is special. In fact, one of my favorite books says this: thy days are known, and thy years shall not be numbered less. If you're in this room right now, it's because you're supposed to be. There are no accidents. There's a reason you showed up here today and yesterday. And if you're still here with us today, it's because God needs you here. Every one of us has a purpose. Every one of us has a mission. In fact, you know what? If you're still here, your mission has yet to be completed. You got to find your purpose, find your why. Why America? Because it's worth fighting for. We are the exception. And we need to remember, it was on that spot in New York City where George Washington placed his hand on the Bible, not just on the Bible. He flipped it open to Genesis 49, verse 22, and put his hand on that. Do you know it talks about that this is the land over the wall for Joseph's inheritance? Joseph didn't get an inheritance over there. Some might say his children did, but you know what? He didn't. This was the promised land that he was promised. And on that very same real estate where George Washington was sworn in as president was the very first time that that American covenant was revoked. We were attacked. Some say, what about Pearl Harbor? We weren't yet America there. The very real estate, guys, we must remember. We must remember. We must turn to God. I tell you this is one of my favorite spots to go visit in Washington, D.C. How many have been there? Who's seen this great flag? I love this flag, guys. You know what? It's incredible. I want to show you that this is a song that Johnny Cash did. It's all about our great flag. Let's pay attention right here. I'm going to give you some history now. I was reminded just the other day as I walked through our county courthouse square. On a park bench, an old man was sitting there. I said, hey, your old courthouse is run down. He said, nah, it'll do for our little town. I said, your flagpole is leaned a little bit. That's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it. He said, have a seat. And I sat down. Is this the first time you've been to our little town? I said, I think it is. He said, I don't like to brag. We're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag over there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And she got powder burned the night that Francis Scott Key sat watching it writing, oh, say, can you see? She got a bad rip in New Orleans with Jackson and Packingham tugging at her seams. And she almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag. But she waved on, though. She got cut with a sword at Chancellorsville. She got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, and Bragg. And the south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. On Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung limp and low a time or two. She was in Korea and Vietnam. She went wherever she was sent by her Uncle Sam. She waved from our ships upon the brawny foam, and now they've just about quit waving her back here at home. In her own good land, here she's been abused. She's been burned, dishonored, denied, refused. And the government for which she stands is scandalized throughout the land. She's getting threadbare. She's wearing thin. But she's in good shape for the shape she's in. You see, she's been through the fire before, and I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning, and we take her down every night. We never let her touch the ground, and we fold her up right. You know what, on second thought, I do like to brag, because I am mighty, mighty proud of that ragged old flag. Thank you, Johnny Cash. Woo! Does that make you feel good? Woo! I love it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Johnny Cash. You know what? I want to give you guys that free song. You know that song I sang earlier? Somebody asked me how I can get it. I said, you know what? Can I just give it away for free? Who wants a free song? Okay. That's my cell phone number. Take a picture of it. I want you to text the word home to me. I'm going to go ahead and sing you that song absolutely free. I'm going to keep this up for 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Utah, we love free stuff, don't we? Go ahead and send that. I'll send you guys a free song. My father, Alan, produced the inauguration celebrations for Ronald Reagan. He was a friend of our family. In fact, my mother told me when he was there at his inauguration celebrations, they were all kept back in this kitchen area. And in walks President Ronald Reagan with his Secret Service agents and everything. He's walking with him, and he sees my dad. He goes, Alan! And he goes running over to give my father a big hug. Oh, boy, his Secret Service agents did not like that. Mr. President, you can't do that. But I have so much respect. I took my second oldest son to see his final resting spot because I wanted to drive the message home. You see, President Ronald Reagan once said this. He says, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We did not pass it on to our children through the bloodline. It must be fought for, protected, and passed on to them to do the same. Otherwise, we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children of what life was once like in the United States when men were free, close quote. And I shared that quote with them at the gravesite of Nancy and Ronald. I said, son, never forget that quote, because things have changed in our country. Things have changed. Can you feel it? Can you hear it? Can you see it? Can you smell it? My good friend Mark Wills in country music has a song called Looking for America. Because I remember the good old days. And that quote from President Reagan rings so true to me in such a short period of time that we can go from where we were to where we are, but we don't have to stay where we are. We can do something about it. All the fake news that you guys are hearing about and seeing, and it's just disgusting, isn't it? It grosses me out. It angers me. I could choose to get angry, get unhealthy because of the stress of it all, or I can shut off the news and I can go do something. I can act. We can act. And when Tina told me about this, I said, I am there. Where do I sign up? And I tell you, I'm so grateful for patriots like Tina Horlocker, a single mom of 10 children. And what she's done for all of us here today. Thank you, Tina. And all of the volunteers, guys, thank you for being here. We have to do this. When we were eating breakfast yesterday with General Flynn, you know what he said to us? He says, you are the choir. You are the front lines. And I tell you this, only a small percentage of patriots actually fought and died for our country. It was a small amount. But they took over the largest fleet and the largest army in the world. Bunch of rednecks with pitchforks, guys. We did it. And we can do it again. So we're here today to take back that liberty. God bless you. Guys, I'm gonna wrap this up. Oh, it looks like they're gonna kick me. I got 6 minutes, it says. Can I do my last song? Can I do my last song? Is that all right? We do one more? Okay, I'm gonna skip over this, guys. I wanna make sure. Do I have time? Okay, I got 6 minutes, it says. Guys, I'm going to tell you this. I love our country, and I'm going to just, I already told you an Andy Andrews story. You guys go check out this book. It's amazing. I'm going to skip over that, but this is what we're up against. We got to stand for the Constitution. I remember sitting there looking at it right there in front of me, reading the words. I love John Hancock. Man, he was all in, wasn't he? Boy, put his big name on there. All these guys, they were signing their death warrants. I love this painting right here because it reminds me that even George Washington, who I tell you I don't know, he must have been one of the Avengers, that guy. He had God on his side. I want you to go read The Bulletproof George Washington by, guys, David Barton. Go read that book. You'll love it. But I love this book right here because it was written by a prisoner of the Holocaust who survived 3 Nazi death camps. Dr. Viktor Frankl. You know, I got to interview his grandson on my podcast. And it was so cool because we talked about a quote that he said once. He said this in his first chapter. He says, don't aim at success. You see, because success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And can only do so as an unintended side effect to one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself. That's fancy talk, so he broke it down and simplified it. He said this in the very next line. If you know your why, if you understand your why, you can endure almost any how. How is none of our business. He has the how. What we need to do is trust in the Almighty and do our part. Lift where you stand. Get involved. Write those letters. Do the protest. Stand up. But most importantly, educate your children. Teach them. Because like Barbara Bush said at one time, she says, what we do here in the White House is far less important than what you do in your house. So it all starts at home. Let our children know the truth. Seek out the truth, for only the truth will set you free. Guys, there's one last founding father I'm going to tell you about. I love this story, and it's right here. Benjamin Rush. He is incredible. Benjamin Rush had a vision. You see, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams became sworn enemies, just like we see with a lot of politicians today. They hated each other after a while. But this man right here was given a vision of a young child carrying a history book from the future. He was able to read in this vision that history book, and he saw that John Adams humbled himself, and he wrote a letter asking for Thomas Jefferson's forgiveness, and let's be friends once again. Guys, he went up to John Adams and he said, please write that letter lest thou makest me a false prophet. So he did. And guess what? Just like in that vision, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams became best friends once again. It's possible to bury the hatchet. It's possible to come together. You know what? I love this story because this is the bed where Thomas Jefferson passed away. You know what his last dying words were? This agnostic, deist, atheist. Guys, I resign myself to God and to my country and to my child. You see, he had sat there in his deathbed, and on the 3rd of July, he sat up. He says, what day is it? What day is it? Guys, this is on the day before the 50th anniversary of our nation's Declaration of Independence. His people in the room didn't want to tell him because they knew it would break his heart. He says, sir, it's the 3rd of July. Oh, to be able to live and to breathe the air of the 50th anniversary of our nation's Declaration of Independence. It was his last dying wish. he got it. You see, not only did he pass away on the 50th anniversary of our nation's Declaration of Independence, but in a separate part of the country, on his deathbed as well, John Adams, that little 10-year-old boy in that South Meeting House, on his deathbed lay there. And these are the dying words of this, our second president. And the name of my speech tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Independence Forever. I hope you've enjoyed this tonight. Can I sing one last song? I got a minute 41. We're going to do it anyways, guys. In memory of our God, our family, and everything we hold dear, guys. This song is called For America. Here we go. I miss my southern woman. I miss the southern nights in our town. Come on, you guys. Here we go. The smell of honeysuckle is singing to her with the tailgate down. We used to dream about the house we built together. We tied a knot and then I bought some land. But Uncle Sam called and that's when I came running. She's the reason I'm a soldier man. Here we go. For those purple mountains in the land of the free. For those wide open spaces as far as I can see. For our children's future, there's no greater cause. This is why I'm a soldier for a nation under God. For America. I miss my son and daughter. I miss those little arms around my neck. Oh yeah. The taste of fried chicken and barbecuing out on the deck. I miss those drives we take down to the lake together. We watch those fireflies light up the sky. Now my nights are lit with rockets, flames, and thunder. I know that I'm in her prayers tonight. Here we go. For those purple mountains in the land of the free. For those wide open spaces as far as I can see. For our children's future, there's no greater cause. This is why I'm a soldier for one nation under God. For America. Ladies and gentlemen, let's stand up and stretch our legs. Guys, let's get noisy for America. Are you all in? Are you all in? Yes! For all those who served us, those who laid down their lives. Come on! For the banner of freedom, they lay it on the line. For our children's future, there's no greater cause. Come on! This is why I'm a soldier for a nation under God. For America! Yeah, one more time! For America! I'm Nathan Osmond and I love this country. God bless America! Woo! Thank you so much. Thank you, Tina.